I met a dragon once. Actually, we kind of hit it off. But then it got awkward. That was in a different universe, not this one. Still. Mwah. This is mine, not yours. No touchy. Obviously, I talk a lot about science. I mean, I'm a scientist. This is what I do. Am I paying too little attention to magic, do you think? Is there magic in this universe? How much exactly and where? Little heads up, humans. Gonna say some stuff here that you might not like. Not that I care whether you like it or not. This is so you can take responsibility for your own response. If you find yourself getting righteously pissed off or indignant, your best course of action is to go watch something else. You're unlikely to change my mind, and there's millions of other videos. Okay, magic. People used to believe magic was everywhere. Sometimes they called it magic, sometimes they called it gods. The distinction between those two is always a bit hazy. Gods and magicians are both beings who can change the universe just by wanting to hard enough. What's the difference between a wizard and a witch? Okay, the obvious one, they have different naughty bits, but it's not just that. Magicians are thought of as dudes who spend their lives studying magic, getting good at it, and they kind of just pull their energy from the universe. They do spells, they know the magic words. They might be good people, they might be evil. Witches, though, they're in the Christian Bible, and they've sold their souls to the devil, apparently. A witch's curse is partly demonic, mythologically. A prayer is a wish, but it's also a spell. These days we have Wiccans. They call themselves witches, but they cast spells, and Satan's not consulted. This is a wish with some ceremony and pageantry and symbolism layered onto it. Catholic priests also make wishes, and they layer theirs with different ceremony and pageantry and symbols, and they call theirs prayers. So what's the difference? For my money, the difference is what works. See, we don't wish for things we don't care about. I'm a practical guy. I care about outcomes. When there's a drought, you can pray for rain, or you can cast a spell, or you can, I don't know, seed the clouds. Actually, there's not a lot of consensus yet on whether that actually works, so you're probably better off building an irrigation system to water your crops. Sometimes there's a better way to solve the real problem. Used to be, when there was an eclipse, it was a sign that some god was mad at you. It took us a while to get to where we are today with a better understanding of how things happen. An eclipse isn't so scary when you can predict it per location, around the world, down to the minute. It used to be a reason to sacrifice people. Today it's a spectator sport. The weather and plagues, they're harder to predict, but at least we know why it's hard. They're complicated, but not magical. Now, we understand a lot about the mechanisms. We've seen behind the curtain. So that stuff has moved out of the realm of magic. Now science handles it. We call it meteorology or epidemiology. That's how it works. Everything's magic until we figure it out, then it's science. What about this? The brain. You may have heard me talk about the limitations of this tool. And for damn sure it's imperfect. But look where we are. Our brains are just a little bit better than those of chimps. And we're running this planet. Whether chimps survive or go extinct has very little to do with the decisions they make. It's got everything to do with ours. Their fate is in our hands, like the fate of nearly all species on the planet. This fantastic device has given us staggering power over life and death. I mean, not mine personally. I mean any human brain. Although actually, yes, especially mine personally. Ah, my dear, my own, my precious. Do you have a pet? A dog? We used to have a dog. Until and unless you upgrade its brain, that dog depends on you for its survival. You walk it around on a leash. It only goes where you let it go. Chimps in zoos, they're just as constrained. Now, animals living in the wild in the jungle, they're just doing their thing, unaware of us. But we know that the only reason they go on living is because we haven't yet bulldozed their environment to put up high-rises. We deign to let them live. Noblesse oblige. Maybe because they're cute. Some of them are ugly. Or maybe because we don't happen to live there just now. Or, maybe we dimly realize that if we wipe out all the native habitat, it might be bad for us. But either way, they may as well be in a zoo already. The zoo that is the bit of the world we haven't paved over yet. A couple centuries ago, we didn't need nature reserves. We have to stop ourselves from making the whole planet into one big city. Caves of steel. Our priceless brains gave us dominion over the planet. As of now, the human brain is the most complicated thing we know about in this universe. Maybe tied with the immune system. That's insanely complicated too. We're studying our brains, trying to understand them. We understand bits and pieces. Stuff about how neurons work, a bit about the subsystems. Are we capable of understanding our brains completely? Is that a contradiction? I mean, if our brains were simple enough for us to understand them, would we be too stupid to understand them? You know what I mean. Complicated. More complicated than the weather or viruses. But is it magic? Is there a part of you, your consciousness, that isn't part of your body? You can believe what you want. You can believe there's a magical part, or a spiritual part, a soul, whatever you want to call it. You can believe that your consciousness somehow exists beyond the physical stuff that science knows the most about, the protons, the neutrons, and electrons that make up all the matter in the rest of our bodies. That the mind can exist without the body, or at least that the mind is not made of physical stuff. There's a name for this idea. Mind-body dualism. But the universe has given us a big ol' clue-by-four. We are not special. We used to think the sun revolved around our world, around the earth. Nope. The sun's the center. Earth is just a planet. We thought the sun was special too. Turns out it's one star out of trillions and trillions. It's typical. Common. We used to think life itself was magical. Now we know a lot more about how we're built. Microscopic organelles put together to form cells, using DNA to replicate, cells acting in concert to form organs and systems. It is insanely complicated, no question, but it all comes down to moving parts that obey physics and chemistry. Bits that obey rules. And as far as we can tell, those rules of physics are the same throughout the whole cosmos. The same rules govern the insides of our bodies and the motions of distant galaxies. The more time goes on, the more the picture takes focus. In fits and starts with some, wrong turns. And it points in the direction of a universe operating according to unfeeling rules. We're part of the universe, but it's not here for us. What are the most numerous species on Earth? It's not humans. If you go by biomass, it's probably the animals we domesticated. Dogs, cats, cows, pigs, sheep, donkeys. If you go by raw numbers, it's probably the bacteria. Or maybe certain viruses, if you count those as alive. Some debate about that. Most of the mass in the universe isn't alive, we're pretty sure. Most ordinary matter is tied up in stars. But we think the universe is only 4 or 5% normal matter. About a quarter of it's dark matter, which we know very little about, and the rest is dark energy, which who the hell knows what that is. See, there's still more we don't know than what we do. And most of the universe is mostly empty space. And most of the non-empty part is nothing like us. Whole lot of the universe where we would not want to try to live without a lot of help. This is where some people are tempted to dismiss scientific explanations because they can't explain every single thing. Well, that's an unrealistically high bar. Chances are we'll never be able to explain everything. I'll explain why in another video. This one's got enough to cover it already. Getting back to what we do know. Our bodies are made of normal matter, protons, neutrons, and electrons, forming atoms, with most of those being carbon, and hydrogen, and oxygen, and nitrogen. All living things on Earth are made up of the same kinds of atoms arranged in some similar ways, like the double helix of DNA. We know how arms and limbs work. We know how hearts and kidneys work. Those things are all mechanical. They're built out of living cells, and it's kind of amazing that it all works as well as it does. Should we expect the brain, that one organ, to be radically different from the rest? We used to think our species was unique. Well, there are a few things we can do better than others. As I said, our brains are just a little bit smarter in certain critical ways. But we know crows can solve puzzles and use tools. Dolphins can cooperate, work in groups, and they might even create art. There's evidence to suggest that elephants are self-aware. And remember, we might be the only species of humans around now, but there used to be others. Let's posit that humans have souls. Well, then it's logical to assume that chimps do too. I mean, they're so similar to us. Dolphins, octopuses, crows, they're smart. Not as similar. Do only smart animals get souls? How about dogs? Well, we like them a lot. Not so smart, really. Are you going to be the one to tell them they're soulless? You monster? Where do you draw the line? Rodents? How about insects? Bacteria? Or just rocks? Do the sun and the moon have souls? I can't answer this. I don't think any scientist can. We don't have an experiment to test for it. It's odd to me, though. Evolution got us here. And that's hard for people to accept. Mainly because our little ape brains can't conceive of the vast amounts of time involved. A few billion years since the Earth formed. We have trouble planning 5 years ahead. It turns out, with the right conditions, life can evolve into a staggering variety of forms if you give it lots of time. At least, we know it happened once. Here. We're still clueless about whether life in the universe is rare or common. But that's the universe's big hint. The more we learn, the more we realize the universe is not about us. It doesn't care about us. We just happen to live here. We're the product of indifferent physical laws and a lot of random chance. We are literally lucky to be here. So you want to believe that you or your brain or your mind is part magical? You can believe in mind-body dualism if you want. But here's my take. It's 0% magic. The physical world is all there is, and that's all we're made of. There's a name for this idea too: physicalism. By now, plenty of dead humans have been dissected. No one's ever found anything magic in the corpses. Not that we'd know if we were looking right at it. Right? What's magic look like? What's it smell like? Now, you might be saying, well, hey, we can't see or smell electrons either. We can run experiments on them, though. We can power a light bulb with flowing electrons. But if we can't find a way to detect magic, it might as well not exist. See, that's the falsifiability principle again. If you think something contains magic, give me a way to prove it doesn't. If you can't, then it ain't science. It's idle speculation. People have tried to prove there's life after death, like that there are ghosts. That is falsifiable. If a ghost can do something we can see or hear or somehow measure. The trouble is, we make a lot of mistakes. We have confirmation bias, and we start to think we've found evidence when really we've just tricked ourselves into thinking we found evidence. Other scientists try to replicate the experiments. It doesn't pan out. When you do repeated experiments and the effects get smaller, they trend towards zero, then you're on the wrong track. No ghosts. Can't say there's evidence of life after death that way. Reincarnation? Same story. So far, nobody's been able to convince the scientific community that any of these things are real. And not for lack of trying. Lots of people have tried really hard. A lot of scientists want to find evidence of all this. And if anyone had succeeded, believe me, it would have been huge news, a revolution. There'd be people starting up corporations to cash in on it. Make phone calls to the deceased. $5 a minute. You know, along with modern day witches, we have modern day Satanists. They have churches. And unlike the Wiccans, they do invoke Satan by name. They think he's the cool one. And they have their own pageantry and their own ceremonies, and they do spells. You know how seriously I take those? Exactly as seriously as I take the Christian ceremonies or the Wiccan ones. If people want to spend their time dressing up and saying funny words, fine. I mean, am I going to call them out on that? It's just, I have zero expectation that reading words out of any book, no matter how many skulls are drawn on it, will magically make anything happen, or that it ever has. You know why I'm so sure? Because have you seen people? There's nothing, no idea so frickin' stupid that some human won't have tried it. Try telling kids not to say Candyman to a mirror. See what happens. And if people could summon up the Dark Lord and sell their souls for a couple $100, there'd be a whole industry trying to cash in on that. Souls Unlimited. The Lucifer Legal Eagles. Damnation LLC. At least not in this universe. Maybe in another one. Like, find yourself a flat magical world on the back of a turtle or something, with gods and demons and the whole schmear. I bet if you lunks had access to that, you'd mess up it and us. See, there's a reason I don't let you have this. You can't handle the multiverse. Hey, I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. All the scientists could be wrong, even now. If you want to believe there's a magic part of you, a part that can, say, keep existing after your body is gone, knock yourself out. Just don't use that belief as a basis to make decisions that affect my life. Like, if your holy book tells you that God hates shrimp or gayness, And you try to use that as an excuse to pass laws that I have to follow, I who do not subscribe to the sacredness of your book. Because if I'm not wrong, then anything we do to trade off happiness during life in return for happiness after death is a bad deal. Trading something for nothing. I'm going to act as though this life is all I'm going to get. And when it's over, oblivion. This is another idea that's hard to get. This is another idea that's hard to grasp, right? Oblivion. Maybe tougher than evolution, which we can see the effects of. But our brains weren't designed for it. It's another flaw. Our brains were designed to keep us alive and to keep our tribe alive, our descendants. We have the ability to imagine the future so we can plan for it. Not that we always do, but anyway. It's a fabulous ability. Being able to picture what our lives would be like tomorrow or next year. Probably another tool that made us the dominant species. But we can also imagine what it might be like after we're dead. And because we can imagine it, it kind of feels like we can observe it, which makes it seem like some part of us will still be floating around watching. Just because we can imagine it doesn't mean it'll happen. But what we can't imagine is the opposite, the not existing. What would it feel like to not exist? What would you see or hear? The answer is you wouldn't. There's nothing. There's no brain to do the thinking. It's a nonsense question. That failure of imagination makes it harder for us to accept the possibility because we weigh possibilities by imagining them. But just because we can't imagine not existing doesn't mean it won't happen. There's a fairly basic idea in science called Occam's razor. I happen to have it here. You didn't expect it to be pink, did you? That's on you. No, Occam's razor isn't a real razor, you meatheads. It's an idea. It says, all things being equal, the simplest explanation is probably the right one. Which is simpler? That the sun goes around the earth, or that the earth goes around the sun? Well, heliocentrism won out. It explained the motions of the planets. They all go around the sun in ellipses, and the earth is a planet too. To explain their motions with the sun going around the earth, you had to believe the planets had way more complicated orbits. It's simpler to believe in physicalism than in dualism. So that's where my money is. But hey, if you're with me on this one, it's not all bad. I got 4 pieces of good news. First, if there's no experience after death, there's no pain or suffering. No worries. No cares. That means being dead isn't so bad. We might fear death only because we evolved to. Being dead may not actually be scary or unpleasant. Of course, all things being equal, we'd rather not die. That's kind of innate. But you can quiet the fear of death if you don't believe it'll actually be bad once it arrives. Second, if there's no hell to worry about, no Mr. Needful waiting around to make us miserable for eternity, then we don't have to worry about concepts of sin while we're alive, baby. Nobody telling us how to live our lives. We get to decide for ourselves. The only limits are the rules of physics and our own ability to make smart choices. That doesn't necessarily mean hedonism. I mean, okay, we all have our coping mechanisms for the pain of life. Some healthier than others. I'll get that later. But whether you think there's a God keeping score or not, we all, I hope, want to leave this world a bit better than when we arrived. Not for God's sake, for our own. For self-respect. Now, as much as we might try to be careful and not get hit by a bus, we all get old. That's inevitable, right? Here's the third piece of good news. It might be possible to stay alive indefinitely, to cure aging, because if we're just physical stuff, then all the mechanisms of aging must be physical ones too, with physical steps we can take to reverse them. Now, don't discount this idea just because some mad scientist is saying it. A lot of medical professionals believe we can get there, maybe in the next 30 years. We even have examples of this in nature. There's a species of jellyfish that sometimes rejuvenate themselves, getting younger instead of older. If they can do it, we can do it. You're not going to let some jellyfish show you up, are you? And we might be able to do it without turning ourselves into jellyfish, but with technology, sending teeny tiny robots into our bloodstream to clean things up. Here's number 4. If the brain's just physical, then someday we may have the technology to replicate it artificially. We already have technology we've built that behaves in ways we don't entirely understand. If we can build stuff that baffles its creators, then even if we can't fully understand how the brain works, we might be able to copy it. This is where the idea of uploading your mind into a computer starts to seem possible. That's another way we might live forever, and even colonize the whole galaxy as thinking machines. Of course, it also opens the door to artificial intelligence. That's a good news, bad news situation. Something for another day. I'll tell you about my car sometime. All right, I'm done. One more thing. I should. You may have heard. I did have a run-in with a god one time. And he was kind of a jerk. We fought a bit, and he kind of ended up getting killed. I don't want anybody to think I'm prejudiced against gods. I'm sure yours is perfectly nice. Peace among worlds.